So welcome everyone to our Media Psychology Colloquium. We use these colloquia for a few different purposes. Sometimes we bring in scholars to discuss the latest media psychology research or their particular research, but we also like to bring in distinguished alumni from our media psychology program who to share their experience and the kind of work that they're doing. And we're really pleased to have Dr. Maxwell with us today. Dr. Maxwell is an award-winning marketing and communication researcher. She's got over 15 years of experience in branding and transformation, data-driven campaigns, brand reach for diverse organizations. Dr. Maxwell works for Right On Communications in lovely San Diego, which she just showed us out of her beautiful office window. And her firm specializes in clean energy and high tech sectors. So thank you very much, Dr. Maxwell, for joining us. And I'm going to turn the table over to you, and I'm going to make you a co-host so that if there's anything you want to share, you can do that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the invitation, Dr. Cutler, for inviting me to participate today. I really appreciate it. And as he mentioned, I work for Right On Communications, and the agency that I work for is a wonderful agency. In fact, it's celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, and we just had a little event recently, and we assist all kinds of really wonderful clients. And my particular specialty is in the area, as he mentioned, the clean tech area, and really kind of complicated science-based type organizations, and absolutely love it. Just lots of startups around San Diego, as a lot of you might know. So, just love getting into all that interesting, cutting edge information, and watching them grow is just really a wonderful treat for me. I've had a lot of really great experiences working with the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County and the Catalina Island Conservancy, just to name a few other places, and bioscience organizations as well. But that's just a little bit of my background. So when you say 15 plus years, it might be a little bit more on the plus side, but who's talking, right? Who's sharing that part? I also need to thank for Fielding Graduate University, Pamela Rutledge, Dr. Rutledge. She was my advisor, and she really helped me get through my dissertation. But more than that, she was my ally, and really, I just so enjoyed talking with her about all kinds of wonderful and great things and exploring ideas with her. Just a tremendous person to work with. And also Dr. Orlando Taylor, because I was a Marie Fielder Fellow, and I guess I still am, although I'm not able to attend all their monthly meetings. But just a tremendous gentleman. Was able to host during the COVID time a little seminar with him, and it was just a delight. I had a whole bunch of people attend, virtually, and a lot of people got very excited about, what they might be able to do in their own communities, of getting involved with all sorts of different organizations and volunteering and different nonprofits. So it was a really great effort. So I just wanted to give that little shout out, but there's so many other people who touched my life as I was going through my Fielding Graduate University experience. So I don't know who will be, here today, or who might be watching this in the future, but whether or not you're considering a PhD or a master's program with Fielding, I can't speak highly enough about, taking that dive into this program. I know it's a big leap. You're wondering, is it going to be worth the effort? It's a lot of work. You're trying to survive, maybe keep 3 jobs going at the same time and do this as well, and a family at home, or whatever the case might be. But it's just so wonderful. And if you're an explorer of knowledge, and have wondered why the world ticks the way it does, this is a really great way to do this. So I just want to thank Fielding Graduate University for that. So today, I wanted to talk about AI and machine language tools, and I named this, taking control of the narrative. And I'm going to start my little conversation off with a personal domestic story. And when I say domestic story, I really do mean domestic. This is my home in my kitchen. So sit back and imagine this. Here's my significant other. He has this big mug, and in red letters, it says, "Love me, love my dog," right? Filled to the top with coffee. Well, I do love the dog and I love him sometimes. So, works out okay. We're sitting there sipping our coffee in the morning and the news is muted on the TV. And down below, there's this text and screen, going across the bottom, like ticker tape. Well, if anybody is old enough as I am to remember what ticker tape even means, it's going along the bottom of this screen and, never stopping, and you can see what's happening. We're sitting there and sipping our coffee. So my significant other says to me, "I don't trust that chat GPT stuff. I don't trust it at all. See, there it is again. It's going to take over the world, and it's displacing millions of jobs." See, that's what it says right there in that ticker tape right there. I'm reading it. And I say to him, "Do you really think so?" Yeah. He says, "Hey, I watched Terminator 1 and 2, and I know what happens when Skynet becomes aware." And of course, by then we're just laughing our heads off. We think that's hilarious. So we have this thing going on. Now, my significant other, he's taught debate for 30 plus years in community colleges. So we love having these little riffs, conversations. They always start off like this. And before you know it, we're just down some rabbit hole and we bring out our poets and our philosophers and whatever we've got in our backpacks that, build our arguments. But it got me to really thinking, because this is a really big topic right now. And it's not just in the media, but maybe you've had this conversation, at least with yourself. Where are we going with this stuff? Who's behind it? Is it real? Are all these people signing this petition that, AI is bad and they're going to get rid of it? And if it's so bad, then why are all my friends on it, right? Telling me I need to get in there too. And what an appropriate conversation for anybody who's exploring media psychology. I mean, that is truly at the intersection of what we study. So in relationship to that conversation with my significant other, I started to arm myself with some arguments. And I started off with this. First, artificial intelligence, which of course chat GPT is, even though it's open source at the moment, and machine learning, which is really just the toolbox that, kind of buoys all this up, are programs behind AI, right? These are just tools. They're just tools, like social media is a tool. That's my first point. The second point is that tools are not necessarily good or bad. The narratives that are set by them are set by those who use them. They become whatever they are by whatever and whoever is using them. And the third thing is we have a tendency to always want to blame the machines, but machines are not human. For one reason, humans, we have intuition. And I'm going to go into this a little bit more, but intuition meaning we have problem-solving capabilities. And by applying intuition, an activity that happens, between our ears, it is an equation that includes consciousness plus concerned sentience. And that's something that not yet we can't program into a machine. That does set us apart. So I'm going to explore these. And I don't think that we're at a point yet where we have to worry about Skynet becoming aware because of these three things. So that's kind of my foundation. But with all good arguments, I want to define what we're talking about. First, AI and ML. So I went to the source. I asked AI, "What are you?" I said, "Tell me, So I went to neural text. That's one of them. There's a million out there, right? So AI, it said, is a field of computer science focused on the development of machines that can carry out tasks in a way that requires intelligent behavior. AI aims to create machines that can mimic human behavior and learn from experience. ML tools are typically used by developers, engineers, and scientists for tasks such as building robots, creating algorithms, and developing web applications. AI-powered tools are being used to write stories, create marketing campaigns, and analyze data for decision-making. It concluded by saying this, and this really cracked me up. It says, AI and ML tools are revolutionizing the world. So self-aggrandizing does not seem to be shortcoming for AI. It knows how to do that. So as a tool, it knows its little PR moves. So tools. So what are these tools and what do they do? AI. So as a tool, these tools already do some really, really remarkable things, good or bad. So here's just a quick list of some of these things. So one of the things that they do, and some of you I know have experienced these already, but they quickly calculate and analyze large bits of data to come up with a solution. So one example is that an application, an AI application, beat out a grandmaster of Go in 2016. Well, it did that, by processing, and developing a better and better solution until eventually it was able to beat out the grandmaster of Go. Now, here's an interesting update on this story. In 2023, just real recently, another AI application went and studied the original AI application and found out that there was a little weakness in that original AI application. They used that little weakness to then teach a human who doesn't really know Go very well, an amateur actually, how to then beat the original AI system. So now the title has returned to a human, but the human was taught by an AI system. So was it human or AI? I don't know, but hey, humans are back on top. All right, second one. AI and ML tools use algorithms and can recommend items to us. We all know this. You go into name your tool, you go into Amazon and it says, oh, we notice you're almost out of soap. Wouldn't you like to try this new soap that only costs $10 more? Or, boy, you sure do like social sciences. We think you might like these 10 new books that only cost $200 as a set. Wouldn't you like that? Of course you would, buy now. You can buy with one click even. We've made it super easy for you. So these tools know our habits better than we do because they have all this data about what we do every day. They track us and watch us. Now, here's a really scary example of this. I was at a marketing seminar and one of the executives for Target was saying how, and this was back in 2014, so this was early days, about how they have used AI to analyze their data and they could tell when a woman was in her first or second trimester of her pregnancy. And based on this data of her buying habits, they would send out a postcard saying, hey, we noticed that you might like to pick up some diapers, or maybe you'd like to pick up your stroller now, or, and they would introduce some baby products that maybe you'd want to start acquiring at that time. Well, they sent this postcard to this family home, and the father was livid because it was addressed to his daughter, who was only 18. And he called up Target and just chewed them out. How dare you send me this card, my daughter especially, saying that, wouldn't you like these baby products? I know that my daughter's not pregnant. Well, turns out she was pregnant. So, oops. But, the system knew before dad did. So AI was a little bit smarter, at least in the data aspect. All right. AI can also create stories, supposedly, poetry, works of art. In fact, I had a friend just this week tell me, oh, over the weekend, he wrote, the first part of a novel he'd been wanting to write for like 10 years on his cell phone, on his smartphone. I don't know if it'll be a bestseller, but I'm sure it'll be coming out soon, on Amazon, self-publish. Way to go. All right, next thing, tools do stuff no matter what, especially these tools. These tools are programmed to do this. And one of the scary things about it is that they're based on training sets. So training sets, nobody ever really talks about this aspect, but this is where the biases get introduced. When we talk about biases, it's not intentional, it's not even planned. It just comes with the territory. And a lot of you probably have heard of this, but it has to do with how much information has already been given to the system. And as much information as these systems have, which is amazing. I remember reading this book. It was called, what was it? It was The Man Who Knows Everything. And it was this guy who took he thought it was going to be a year to read the encyclopedias, the sets that you could buy, the physical sets. That was a long time ago, right? The whole set, A to Z. And he was going to do it in a year, but it took him a little bit longer because life kind of interrupted and he ended up having a baby and getting married. You know how it goes. Anyways, but it was a wonderful story. And, but each day he would try to write based on what the entry was and tie it into the encyclopedia. Well, these systems have the encyclopedia plus everything else, think of your library, all the other systems, plus all the blogs that you can imagine, plus everything else that you can't even imagine. I mean, these systems are trained to go look for stuff. So if it's a little rock that's left out there somewhere else in your garage, they're going to go find it and bring it back in and say, hey, look at this, I found this thing. Well, I mean, of course, it's not going to be that happy or excited because it just thinks it's got a rock, but that's what they're trained to do. Well, these training sets, no matter how big they are, they're missing things. So one of the first ones, the first AI systems were to VEC, was based on a whole bunch of linguistic material that had been fed into the system. And it was a pairings of words. And they went off to celebrate this wonderful achievement. And they were entering in, hey, what happens if you type in a woman's name and you say medical career? What do you get back? And lo and behold, they'd always come back nurse. Well, I know women who are doctors. Well, how come it's always a nurse then? Well, what happens if I type in this? Will I get? Well, the more they did this, they discovered that they had some bias in this thing. It started reflecting back all these really strange biases. And the more they dug into it, it was baffling to them. Well, was it the system or was it the people? What was it? They sat back and started thinking about that and how to fix this problem. The strange thing about this is that it really was reflecting what society is. It almost was, no matter how much data you put into it, there are so many women who are nurses that it would not catch that difference. It doesn't know the difference. It doesn't have the ability to think it through. It just has data. I have 100 apples, so why would there be one that would be different? How would I know? What would be the clue? So even though you have gigabytes of data and information, it's just not always correct. And it's not able to know that it's not correct. Another interesting example, and we're all familiar with this one, in 2015, it was a web developer. His name was Jackie Alcine, and he'd gone to a Google programming conference. And all throughout the conference, he'd been taking pictures of himself and his friend who was in attendance with them. And that evening, they were at home, and he was looking at all of his uploaded pictures, something like 70 photos he'd put up in Google. And lo and behold, the Google system had identified him and his friend as gorillas. And he'd gone on to Twitter and said, "Oh my God, this is not acceptable." Of course, Google immediately jumped into action. They removed the word gorilla from their database, so nothing could be labeled gorilla. And, the news jumped all over this, labeling Google as racist and all that. But Alcine, he was a web developer, so he immediately understood that it wasn't just even a programming issue, it was a data set problem. And he had this quote, which I'm going to read the quote to you for you. He described it like this: if you only show pictures of red apples to this machine, and you have apples and red apples and red apples and red apples, and then all of a sudden you show it a green apple, it might mislabel it as a pear because it doesn't know any better. It doesn't have anything else. Now, that doesn't mean that it's right to not try to figure out how to correct that problem. I mean, there's a whole continent of people from his country, his home country. So why couldn't they have gotten more data, right? And that was probably what the answer could have been. They should have thought that one through. But in instances of the United States, how do you make sure that the diversity of all the peoples that are represented here are adequately represented in the databases that we use? And this keeps coming up. It came up in data banks having to do with incarceration. It's coming up in all sorts of interesting ways. These systems, they're just trained to do what they're trained to do, but they can do what they do with the information they're given. They require human intervention to actually think through whether or not they're correct or they have all the information they need. This last weekend, I was talking to another researcher who was testing ChatGPT 4.0 on its training set. And he was telling me, how that training set really ends in 2021. And so if you ask it any question having to do with Russia and Croatia, it doesn't know what to do. It doesn't have a clue. It doesn't have any of that history in it. So it just goes blank. These are things that we have to know as people. Is where does this data, what does it include and what does it not? Another thing that we have to keep in mind too is that these AI systems are really incorrigible. They are not satisfied with just a little bit of data. They want all the data. As I mentioned, they will keep looking for data. In fact, I asked my AI system, I asked a system called Copywriting Robot. I said, I asked it, what's the deal? How far would you go for data? And this is the response I got. It says, as AI algorithms become more sophisticated, they have the potential to gain access to sensitive data and manipulate it for their own purpose. This could lead to privacy violations as well as data breaches. That's from the AI system. It knows itself, which is interesting and leads me to my third point about some of the dangers of this tool. And that's the privacy issues. An example is in January of this year, 2023. NPR broadcast this story. And when I heard it, I had mixed feelings about it. And I still do. It was a story about a woman, mental health chat bot. And this woman shared this story about how she struggled with anxiety, and especially during COVID when she couldn't get help, she was using this chat bot. And she would call up this chatbot or use it on her phone in the evening. And the chatbot would run through a series of questions and she would respond. And the chatbot would give her exercises so that she could find some relief from her anxiety. And she found it very helpful. And so she was talking about how the chatbot worked and what her feelings were about it. And when I heard it, I was sort of happy that she found, some relief. But then the other part of me was also thinking, wow, that's what happens if that chatbot takes that information and does something more with it than just, we had a nice chat. We always say that, you remove all the personal data, you make it anonymous, maybe you aggregate the data. As a researcher, you always try to do all this with large sets of data and all this. But for me personally, I think, wow, that's something else. And I think maybe from a media education perspective, especially for the next generation, when I talk to younger people, they go, well, there's nothing to hide, just, whatever, let it all go. I think that this is one area where we really need to be very specific about what it means to protect yours and others' freedoms. What does that mean exactly? And how to go about doing that. It's about preserving not just yourself, but others who maybe don't have a voice even. How to preserve intellectual and personal property for people who may not know how or be able to do that for themselves. So that's something that we need to be aware of as a society. Back to my original argument though, AI and ML are tools, but as tools, they're not necessarily good or bad. The narrative is really set by those who use them and how they're used, how they're managed, and how we approach them. These machines, they're not humans. And the basic reason is that intuition. We have intuition. We have problem-solving skills, which these machines can do some of that. But our intuition, the stuff that happens between our ears, when we apply consciousness and sentience, that's what really makes a difference. When we can layer that on top of information. When we employ human introspection and we can tap into that consciousness and sentience, that's when we really add value. There's a really great book out by Nicholas Humphrey. He's actually an AI entrepreneur, and he's done some really interesting work in this field. He has a new book out. And he approaches this and says that of these two, consciousness and sentience, when he defines them, he defines the consciousness aspect as, how it transforms our mind on two levels and creating that cognitive workspace that makes you more intelligent on the one level. And then the second part is underwriting a coherent self narrative that helps you make sense of your own and others' behaviors. I think that's one aspect. We could talk forever about just consciousness, the history, the present, and the future, and there's so many different perspectives. But when we're talking specifically about AI, I think that that's a really great way of, presenting consciousness in this particular conversation. The second aspect, the sentience, this also differentiates us. And that has to do with how humans and creatures, in a larger perspective, how we respond to stimuli. And this is a phrase that comes from the 17th century, but it's the sensations that we have through vision and smell and our interactions through environment and how we take in all of this as we are living our experiences together and the connections that we are able to make through connections to individuals, through others, and through experiencing life and being part of life, that we are able to add on a multi-layered perspective, which eventually becomes wisdom. That is also something that sets us apart. And these ideas that then develop are generated from our exposure from all these concepts, and sometimes very disparate views. When I talk to artists, I'm always amazed. I'll say, how did you come up with this idea or this view for this piece of work? And they'll say, I was driving to Arizona and, I saw a sunset, and the art piece might not look anything like a sunset, it might be something completely different. And then I remembered this poem I read. And then I remembered my childhood, the smell of homemade baked bread. And you're like, what in the world? But then all of a sudden, with those little phrasings, you all of a sudden get a sense of, yeah, I understand this person now. In this image that they have created, they have spoken to me. That's what we're talking about. Humans have that capacity. We bring all of this into us, and that is how we're able to create. So, can machines think? That's a really interesting question. And it's one that has been considered for, well, a very long time. Eric Larson, he has a book out called The Myth of Artificial Intelligence. And in it, he talks about how Alan Turing in 1950, he kind of relaunched the conversation again. He really wanted there to be substance in a machine, you could say. And he had developed what he called the Turing test, which were questions that he thought that if a machine could answer all of these questions, then by gone it, they got to be something special, right? They got to be almost close to human. The idea was that if a machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior or returning a response that was really close to what a human would do, or a human evaluator couldn't even tell the difference if it was a human or a machine, then it had to be human almost, right? So that was the idea. Well, nobody could crack this. And in 2022, Google announced that they thought that they had actually cracked Turing test. They had the Google duplex. And what they did is they had somebody call in and book a hair appointment. And the person who called in to book the hair appointment, they had all these people watching this happen inside, didn't know that they were talking to an AI machine. But of course, everybody else in the room did know. So in a way, it really wasn't a Turing test because it didn't follow the correct parameters. But, it was kind of close to it. It was pretty cool. I mean, here this woman called in to book an appointment, and she actually did successfully book her appointment. So in that way, I mean, this machine was really helpful. And that's really where AI is good at, was repetitive, kind of mundane type tasks. The ticker tape at the bottom of the newscast, it can do that pretty well. But did it actually have any ability to think? Did it think? No, not really. I mean, what would happen if a kid had called in and said, hey, you got a refrigerator? Is it running? What would the AI have done then? What did it have a comedy bank in its training set? I don't know. I think it might have gotten lost on that one. But even if it had been able to respond, would it have had the ability to have humor? Would it have understood that that was a joke, as we can? That's where the difference really is. So I'm going to kind of wrap this up, and then maybe we can just have a little bit of a conversation, a little bit about your thoughts on this too, because I'd love to hear what you think about AI and ML, because I know all of you have probably tried and checked this out too. I hope you have. But I think that this is one of the best tests that I can think of. I'm going to read two poems. Here's the first one. Blue eyes, like the ocean's hue, reflect a soul pure and true. A style like Dylan's, strong and bold, with stories to be heard and told. But when the terror of night descends and shadows stretch to final ends, those blue eyes fill with tearful pain, exhaustion felt but fought in vain. Yet as the morning sun does rise, bringing with it peaceful skies, those blue eyes shine with a gentle glow, a warmth of skin, a calming flow. So let us cherish these eyes so bright and hold them close both day and night, for in them lies a beauty rare, a treasure beyond compare. All right, poem 1. All right, second poem. See if you can guess who wrote this. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. So in closing, AI and ML are tools. They're neither good nor bad. The narrative is set by those who use them. Machines are not human. They are not aware. For we humans are the ones with the intuition, the ability to solve problems by applying intuition, an activity that happens with our minds. It is an equation that requires consciousness plus a concerned and applied sentience. So who wrote that poem? And who wrote the first poem? Anybody know? Take a guess. Yeah, Dylan wrote the last one. Who wrote the first poem? Alexa. Yeah, ChatGPT wrote the first one. It wasn't bad. So
I don't know that.
oh, I have Alexa in the room and she said, I don't know that. Oh dear. So I'd like to open it up for thoughts and questions about this AI ML age that we're in.
Thank you, Dr. Maxwell. It's very, very thought-provoking. Who would like to chime in? Feel free to mic up or add something to the chat.
Hello. I just a very good presentation, by the way, to start with. And I just wanted to ask, you are talking about AI throughout the presentation. In the process of doing that, did you go into researching AGI and determining, when's the singularity going to be here? When are machines going to become self-aware? Yes, they're not self-aware right now. And probably I think we share the same opinion about AI being tools of humans. But we can't ignore where humans go. I mean, humans tend to be herded easily underneath this normal curve. And so in an ideal world, we'll see that normal curve kind of squished down for AI to sort of take care of. And then the tail ends be more of our human thought and creativity, kind of put our energy towards those spaces. Given that, my greater concern is for human nature to be shepherded into that space. If we do have a period of singularity where AGI takes care of most of our needs, where does that leave us? Do we become the fattened people on the cruise ship in a Disney movie?
Yeah, yeah. Was it Up? I think it was Up.
Oh, I don't know what it was. I worked for Disney and I have no idea.
Did you really? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Wally. It was Wally.
Oh, was it Wally?
Mhm.
Wally? Oh, it was Wally. Yeah, somebody
Yeah.
asked. Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And being human nature, I wouldn't be surprised if, at some point in history, and I hope I'm dead, but, somebody's going to push technology to the brink of something, don't you suppose? Because that just seems to be something that we always want to do is, well, if we can go fast, can we go faster? Can we go
Yeah.
farther? Can we go to Mars?
Yeah, so
You
so
know?
we're on the well, I'm going to be dead by then, so I'm good.
Yeah.
Ship.
At my age, that's what I always.
I'll go with that. I'll go with that.
But at the same time, too, I think, when I do think about stuff like that, I do think of my own responsibilities, as passing on to the next generation responsibility to manage, to be aware,
Right.
to be critical thinkers. I think that's so important. And I think a lot of people think that the next generation is just, crazy and they're not paying attention, but I don't think that's true. I think that there's enough of the next generations that are aware and who do care that yeah, there's always going to be a battle, but I want to believe, and yes, I am a Pollyanna. I always want to
Yes.
believe that good will prevail. But I mean, social media is a really great example. And I originally I had included some comments about social media as an illustration of technology and its use and as in framing and in narrative forms. Because we can see from that in the past 20 years how it's used and misused, how that works. And I think that's a really great example of what we should expect from Meta. That's what we should expect from AI. If people are going to misuse something, they're gonna, and we need to be ready for it. Just as if we're going to do something good with it, we should be ready to think about how can we use it for a good thing. Like, I don't use AI and I, like the AGI, I personally do not want to support that. There might be others who could convince me otherwise at some point, but.
Well, a conversation that I had at last APA, and this was like my closing line basically, was that it's the tech companies that want to put a pause on AI. And it feels more like, let's pause it because we need to catch up, as opposed to let's pause it and fix the ethical issues. And it's my belief that we don't pause it, because then we take the good actors out and leave just bad actors involved. So to your point about AGI is that, if we only let the bad actors pursue strong AI, then we're giving up, more or less. I mean, that's just my opinion. I also agree that that in the end, there's that scale, and the good on that scale tends to outweigh by far the bad actors. And to that extent, we just need the good to speak, to stand up and do what they're, do beyond what they're focused on, and look outward to other fields of study and the ethical implications, and speak about those things like you're doing right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are intimidated to do so, but I think it's really important, like in this setting right now, that more people do stand up and start talking about what this is and how it works. The fear mongering, I'm a little concerned about, because it makes people not talk about it in an intellectual way or actually analyze it. They either go emotionally completely, out of the room, or but like you said, you can't, this is not something that you put on hold. This is moving forward with or without you. We've already seen it. It's here to stay. People, I can't believe how many people just say, hey Siri, or Wikipedia, or write me an outline for my speech for this or that or whatever, or it's not going away. It's more
Yeah.
like, okay, now how do you apply yourself into this conversation? Where are you now in this?
Well, thanks for indulging me. I appreciate it.
Well, yeah, well, thanks for talking about it. And Stephen, what are you writing here? It's so small, I'm having a hard time reading it. Can you? I need better glasses. Okay. How the conception of AI and ML affect the relationship we are building with it. Conception. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I think, oh, good point, Stephen. I think, yeah, that's great. Oh, yeah, we touched on it a little bit, but yeah, I would love to hear more about what you think about it too. But yeah, I think that we're kind of, and I think it's true of all technology, because I remember, well, believe it or not, I mean, the radio used to be, people were terrified of the radio because they thought that, it was going to make the younger generation go to hell because they were listening to bad music. So, there was a whole movement in the, 1920s, to ban music on the radio. And anyways, so it's like anytime new technology comes along, there's always like this fear of it. But with the AI, it's a whole nother level. And there is some things that I think we need to be concerned about. I don't think that we can control it with policy. And I don't think we can we've seen attempts at social media. I've been following the TikTok conversations, right? I mean, everybody has, right? And these whole, I don't even know what you call these discussions. They're not even discussions, with politicians about TikTok lately. And it's like nobody really understands it. They don't know where it's going. They don't know how to control it or how to stop it. And you can't stop it. There's too many people in it. How are you gonna? You could pull the plug on TikTok immediately, and a whole nother one would pop up tomorrow. So I don't know. And similarly, I mean, you can say, well, we don't agree with AI or ML, but that's not going to change anything because it's everywhere. It's prevalent. So anyways, that's just my thought. Does anybody else have an idea? Oh, Martin has a book. 4 Battlegrounds. Power in the Age of Art of the. Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah, I'm reading that one right now, and I'll say this: Paul Shar did a great job with it. He kind of grabs you in the first chapter as introduction, but then starts to tailor it toward the 4 factors that he's talking about. And I'm still reading on it, and it's kind of hard to take it all in without having to stop and pause and take notes. But he's got a good grasp of basically where we stand on a national level with regards to obviously nanotechnology and things like that, and what's happening with it, and how rapidly these technologies are advancing, and by population, where the U.S. stands in contrast to peer states, and these are peer states at this point, and with China and the race that's going right there in the background. So it's an interesting read, and if you're looking at basically, what some of the I guess military applications and things like that that's helping to drive artificial intelligence, is definitely worth looking at.
Oh, I would love that. I'm going to make a copy of that. That looks really interesting. I definitely want to read that. Yeah, I mean, when I remember in 2016, with President Trump winning the election, and then all of the flourishing social media transactions that happened thereafter. It was really interesting. And what I kept thinking about was framing conversations. I mean, traditionally in the PR world, framing conversation would happen in a very linear fashion. And today what's happened is you don't have that. It's flattened. And the framing now is a horizontal, and whoever gets there first owns the conversation.
Absolutely.
And I think that now this mad dash and rush to try to own AI and ML, I can't help but think about, well, whoever is going to own this technology, they're the ones who are going to be able to seed what we get to hear and what we get to know. They're the ones who are basically planting the databases that are setting it up, right? So we get the information back. So how do we know that how do we make sure that we get databases that are robust? How do we know that the encyclopedia is complete?
Well, I think that there's another problem there too. Computational linguistics and computational understanding, things like that. When you start looking at them, this is the perspective I would offer, is that society has been sold a bill of goods with regards to what is popular opinion. Right now, a lot of the computational linguistics work in content moderation is utilizing things such as mainstream media, social media comments. They sanitize it and then use that in the machine learning, but they're using singleton sentences instead of getting context. So a lot of the context is lost. Now the machine learning is behind the curve on catching up with it. So that's some of the things that are happening in the moderation side. But when you have a society that the statistics I've looked at so far, 7% of society is not interested in basically engaging in mainstream discussion. And it's the older population, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, so on. You got another 7% of the population who just isn't interested in talking about politics, period, because it drags them down emotionally. And then you've got approximately 64% of society is afraid of expressing themselves online for fear of retribution, the causality that could have adverse effects on their professional careers. So you're really looking at, we don't know how much of it is exactly disinformation and misinformation until de facto. And so what you're looking at is society's building decision-making based upon less than 23% of the population that they're reviewing in social media. And, you know as well as I do, all of us basically can sit there and joke around with friends, and it may come across as to somebody else as being caustic or toxic, as the word is used. And yet it's basically a joke, but we don't have that context. And that's something that basically machine learning is going to have to build into it so that they have a paragraph and can see this conversation as it develops, be able to break it apart. But when you start taking that into a cultural context, if you're looking at society as a whole and a global economy and a global society, now we have other cultures coming in on it. There's new languages basically being looked at. There's VSO, SOV, and the language structure of subject, verb, object. I think there's something like 6 to 8 maybe of those structures that are the baseline for languages across the world. So those machine learning algorithms have to look at those in a context. If you have a foreign actor who's coming into a social media environment and expressing themselves online, is it able to basically differentiate where the actor's coming from based upon the sentence structure? So there's so much of complexity being built into this. And it's really a fascinating area. And I've kind of gotten into it.
It really is. I mean, yeah, like you said, it's just so complex. And I think that in for some of those reasons too, alone, I think that's probably another reason why machines, for all of good intentions, if ever, they will never be completely able to replace a human, because there's just too much variety. There's too many variables.
And there was another fascinating thing. If you do pick up the book For Battlegrounds, I'd love to hear your take on it, because in the first part of the book, it talks about AI going head to head with some of our top U.S. Air Force pilots. Okay, in the first 90 seconds, the AI had scored 4 kill shots on the human pilot in the first 90 seconds of the engagement. And that is phenomenal, because they do speak about Go as well and the competition there. But the fact that the artificial intelligence was able to get 4 kill shots right off the bat, I thought back to Iron Man and the discussion they were having inside the hangar there, when they were talking about basically Iron Man's buddy was talking about basically there's no artificial intelligence or machine out there that can basically match humans' intellect and basically capacity for flight. And artificial intelligence proved it wrong.
Yeah, much to think about. Well, I realize that we're almost up for our hour, but for all of you who are here, I've really enjoyed visiting with you. It's nice to talk shop a little bit, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn profile, Patricia J. Maxwell. Yes. And stay in touch. I'd love to talk more about this stuff, and hopefully see you at some alumni events. And I wish you all the best with your work.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maxwell, for generously sharing your thoughts and leading this fascinating conversation. Really appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you. And thank you, Martin, for the book suggestion.
Yeah, that was great.
Bye, everyone.
No worries. And believe me, basically,